By the winter of 1943, the Weixian internment camp in northern China was a sprawling, isolated prison. It was a civilian confinement center run by the Japanese military, holding hundreds of foreign nationals behind barbed wire under brutal, freezing conditions. Inside these walls, one specific prisoner received a miraculous lifeline. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill had personally intervened, negotiating this man's release as part of a high-level prisoner exchange. He was offered a guaranteed ticket out of the nightmare. He turned it down. Without hesitation, he took his secure spot on the exchange list and gave it to a pregnant woman he barely knew, choosing to stay behind in the freezing camp. That prisoner was Eric Liddell. Almost 2 decades earlier, he was the fastest man in the world and an Olympic gold medalist. Elite sprinters build their entire lives around conquering opponents. How does a man wired for a singular, relentless focus on victory develop the internal strength to give up his freedom, and ultimately his life, for a complete stranger? To understand that choice, we have to rewind to the 1924 Paris Olympics. Liddell was a physical powerhouse, born in China to Scottish missionaries and raised in Scotland. He was a massive presence on the field, playing international rugby 7 times for the Scottish national team. Going into the Games, he was the favorite for the 100-meter dash. But when the Olympic schedule was published, Liddell withdrew from his best event months in advance. The qualifiers fell on a Sunday, the Christian Sabbath. The British press turned on him instantly, with some papers openly branding him a traitor to his country. Facing immense public pressure, Liddell made a massive pivot. He entered the 400-meter race. This was a vastly different, grueling distance, and he was entirely unfavored to win against a packed field of global specialists. On July 11th, right before he stepped onto the track for the final, an American coach slipped a folded piece of paper into his hand. It contained a quote from the biblical book of 1 Samuel, "Those who honor me, I will honor." This diagram compares standard 400-meter pacing to Liddell's run. He ignored even energy distribution, sprinting the first 200 meters at a mathematically unsustainable pace. Defying all laws of endurance, he crossed the finish line to claim gold and a 47.6-second world record. Giving up the 100-meter dash was his first major trial. He had successfully demonstrated that his personal convictions carried more weight than the roaring approval of the crowd. 1 year later, at the peak of his global athletic fame, he walked away. In 1925, Liddell packed his bags and returned to China, taking a quiet job teaching science and organizing sports for local students. The environment around him rapidly destabilized. With the Japanese invasion of China in 1937, his routine missionary work became intensely dangerous, surrounded by shifting front lines and hostile military occupation. By 1941, the British government urged all citizens to evacuate. Liddell made his most agonizing choice yet. He placed his pregnant wife and his 2 young daughters on a boat to safety in Canada. He chose to stay behind, driven by an unwavering commitment to the local communities. That separation stripped Liddell of his final earthly comforts. He traded a life with his family for a life of service, preparing him for the ultimate test of his character. Which brings us back to the freezing barracks of the Weixian internment camp in 1943. Inside the wire, the Olympic champion became known simply as Uncle Eric. He organized sports leagues for the teenage prisoners, taught complex science classes without a single textbook, and mediated disputes to keep the camp's fragile morale from collapsing. When Winston Churchill's offer of freedom arrived, Liddell acted with the same consistency he had shown 20 years earlier in Paris. He simply chose the welfare of others over the preservation of his own status. Eric Liddell never saw his family again. In February 1945, he died in the camp from an inoperable brain tumor, a fatal mass of abnormal cells that develops inside the brain. He missed the camp's liberation by a mere 5 months. As he slipped into a coma, his final recorded words to a fellow prisoner were, "It's complete surrender." Eric Liddell demonstrated that the same discipline required to break a world record could be used to sustain a community in its darkest hour. He won gold for Scotland, but he gave his life for the people of China. His victory was found in the quiet, practical trust he placed in his faith, long after the cheering of the crowd had faded.